The reason I killed him was because he was a child molester. He was my bunkie, and I had found out that he was in prison for child molestation. Really bad case. So that night he was trying to justify why he did it, and I just told him to be quiet, and he would have to leave in the morning to find a new cell. But he continued to talk about it and try to justify it. So he was a little bit bigger than me, so I got down and I hit him in his face a few times, and when he fell, I wrapped a cord around his neck and I took his life.
Prisons are supposed to be secure facilities where inmates serve their sentences without any danger to their lives. However, sometimes fellow prisoners can become a threat to one another. In some rare cases, prisoners end up killing their cellmates. Here are 5 prisoners who killed their cellmates and were punished in court. Michael Anderson. In 2006, Michael Anderson was convicted of murder for killing his cellmate, Jason Kelly, at the Tecumseh State Correctional Institution in Nebraska. Anderson strangled Kelly to death with a bedsheet. Anderson was already serving a 40 to 60 year sentence for second-degree murder at the time of the killing. He was sentenced to death for the murder of Kelly. During his sentencing hearing, the prosecutor argued that Anderson had a history of violence and had been previously convicted of aggravated battery and attempted murder. The judge agreed, stating that Anderson posed a danger to society and needed to be kept behind bars. Anderson's case is a tragic example of how quickly violence can erupt in prison and the importance of ensuring that inmates are safe from harm. The brutal nature of his crime and the fact that he had a history of violence likely played a significant role in the judge's decision to sentence him to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Matthew Daly. In 2015, Matthew Daly was sentenced to life in prison for killing his cellmate, 56-year-old Subir Rahman, at the Lewes prison in Sussex, England. Daly, who had a history of mental health issues, stabbed Rahman over 200 times with a pair of scissors and a pen. Daly was initially charged with murder, but pleaded guilty to manslaughter on the grounds of diminished responsibility. Daly claimed he was acting in self-defense, but the prosecution argued that he had intended to kill Locke and had planned the attack in advance. The trial lasted 4 weeks, and in November 2016, Daly was found guilty of murder and sentenced to life in prison with a minimum term of 16 years. The judge described the attack as a senseless and unprovoked attack by an elderly man who posed no threat to you. And Locke's family expressed the relief that justice had been served. Daly's defense team argued that his mental health issues had not been properly addressed, and his family expressed regret that he had not received the help he needed before the attack. Brian Steckel. In 2008, Brian Steckel was sentenced to death for killing his cellmate, Bruce Hunsaker, at the State Correctional Institution in Rockview, Pennsylvania. Steckel strangled Hunsaker to death with a bedsheet. He was already serving a life sentence for a previous murder when he killed Hunsaker. Steckel was charged with first-degree murder and faced the death penalty. However, he pleaded guilty to a lesser charge of second-degree murder in exchange for a sentence of life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. As a result of the killing, Steckel was transferred to the United States Penitentiary, Florence ADX, a supermax prison in Colorado, where he remained until his death in 2014. John Kamel. In 2011, John Kamel was sentenced to death for killing his cellmate, Melvin Powell, at the San Quentin State Prison in California. Kamel stabbed Powell to death with a handmade weapon. Kamel was already serving a life sentence for a previous murder at the time of the killing. Kamel was charged with first-degree murder and was found guilty by a jury. He was sentenced to death in 1995, making him the first person in Utah to receive a death sentence in more than 20 years. Kamel's case was appealed several times, but his death sentence was ultimately upheld. In 2004, he was executed by lethal injection at the Utah State Prison. The murder of Roberto Ortiz was a tragic and senseless act of violence that had a lasting impact on his family and loved ones. While Kamel's execution provided a form of closure, it could never bring back the life that he took. Robert Ackerman. In 2005, Robert Ackerman was sentenced to death for killing a cellmate, John Kerr, at the Oregon State Penitentiary. Ackerman beat Kerr to death with a typewriter. Ackerman was already on death row for the murder of 2 women when he killed Kerr. Ackerman was serving a life sentence at Oregon State Penitentiary when he attacked fellow inmate Frank Hill. Hill was found dead in his cell in September 1999, beaten to death with a metal locker rod. Ackerman was charged with aggravated murder and was later sentenced to death for Hill's murder. During the trial, Ackerman's defense team argued that he suffered from mental illness and was not competent to stand trial. However, the jury found him guilty and he was sentenced to death. Ackerman's case garnered national attention due to his prior criminal history and the brutal nature of the crime. his appeals were exhausted and he was executed on May 6, 2011 by lethal injection at the Oregon State Penitentiary. These 5 prisoners committed heinous acts by killing their cellmates. However, they were all punished in court for their crimes. The justice system ensures that such violent acts are not tolerated, even in prisons. Such incidents are a reminder of the need for more stringent measures to protect inmates from each other.